Joining me today is the lead, the the titular character of Cinderella's Castle, Bryce Charles herself. Bryce, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having me.
So much goes into making a show, and we shot it behind the scenes, and everyone's going to have a good sense of that. But I think what I would love to talk to you about today is just, and we'll do kind of a section, maybe it's a little bit more intensive spoiler, like, things, but just on a general level, I'd love to talk about your take on this character. It's a
Mm,
character that's been done so many ways and so many
yeah,
iterations.
so many versions of Cinderella out there.
And as an actor, and you're such a disciplined and studied actor. I mean, I loved watching
Thank
you in
you. It's
rehearsal
kind.
because you would constantly be questioning, like, okay, if I'm here, what does that mean? And where does this, like, I could see your brain always kind of piecing through, like, what is the sequence of events and what does that mean for me? I'm just curious, how do you begin to approach like this version of Cinderella? Do you take on any of the sort of trappings, pun intended, of like previous iterations, or are you like, this is a completely fresh idea? Like, as an actor, when you got that script, how did you kind of, what was your entry point into thinking about it?
I mean, I honestly had a harder time wrapping my head around this version of Cinderella than I would have liked, just because there are a lot of Cinderella influences. There's a lot of Cinderella versions out there that you could, pull from, and I wasn't exactly sure, especially this being like a developmental work. Like, I think
Right.
sometimes people forget to when you're putting on an original show, and particularly with Starkid, there's not a lot of time or resources to just do a bunch of workshops and work out kinks and stuff. We have to do all of that work, the workshopping and the development, of the characters and the music and all of those different things in real time in that rehearsal period. So I was definitely finding it, and that's also why I was asking. I appreciate that you that you noticed all of that too. Definitely asking a lot of questions, and I was like, "Oh
Well,
God,
and
I hope Nick is
because
sick of me."
you drove, I mean, you literally, every single scene is around kind of like what your arc is. And so it's kind of easy for us supporting actors to be like, well, I come on and I say this, but it's like you have the emotional weight of everything, and if it doesn't make sense to
Yeah,
you, the show won't make sense at all.
yeah, and there were times where I definitely felt the weight and pressure of that, and not to I tried to not let that, get to me and get in the way of the process, so I can just do the work I needed to do to find the character in the limited time we had before we opened. And then we had a limited run to then, really hone it in. And then it's like, you got to set all of those things in a pressure cooker, in a very
Yeah.
limited amount of time. But I think ultimately with the conversations I ended up having with Nick about the character and the lore, backstory stuff that is embedded in the show through exposition, and then other things that aren't really explained during the show, because Starkid is so good with world building. So there's a lot that is touched on in the shows, and we've seen that with Hatchetfield. There's so many different things that you're like questioning in one show, but then it gets answered in another show, or maybe several shows down the line. So in the lands that are, there's just a lot of lore and information that Nick gave to me, and then I was just sitting with it. I also kind of watched, I grew up loving Ever After. I loved Brandy, Cinderella. And then also there's this new movie, Damsel, that just came out on Netflix in the past year or so, or something like that, starring Millie Bobby Brown. I watched that a couple of times actually too, because that is like this whole new age princess archetype where she's like, I'm gonna fight my way out of this by myself. And so I kind of just took a bunch of references from all of my years, growing up watching fantasy stuff and watching fairy tale things, and then also some newer content to sort of inform different moments. Because the thing with this Ella, that I kind of had a hard time with and was asking Nick a lot of questions about was, the tone shifts throughout the show,
Right.
because it's a dark comedy. And so Ella is in this very serious, dark circumstance. She's in a very awful environment. It's very traumatic. It's very toxic and awful, and dangerous. It's very dangerous. But then there are jokes and there's levity, and it's like, how focused, how straight do I play this?
Right.
Versus how much do I lean into, the comedy or the levity here and there. and finding that, I think, in the nuances of that was tough, but I felt good about where it landed, just because we
I,
got more reps in the process.
I think too, Hatchetfield feels. I think because we all did it for a while, and we had Nightmare Time, and then we had Nerdy Prudes. To me, it felt easier just from just a glance to kind of go, here's okay, this is the funny part. All right, and here's the you could kind of see the turns, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think this
yeah.
show, because even the language was new,
Sure, the
the
heightened language and
yeah,
when
the
you break from that or when do you lean
right,
into it? Yeah.
even yeah, you come on and you're lamenting, not like, oh man, isn't this you're like saying these words that sound very uh
Heightened Shakespearean even
heightened classical
sometimes.
Shakespearean.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and how do you find the like, and this is when we're kind of not breaking the fourth wall, but this is like, okay, but we can drop that whole kind of thing and wink at the audience. That was not as, and I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just it was a different vibe than Hatchetfield, and I know for me, and I'm sure you felt this, and I times 100 of I just kind of felt like the real challenge was like, oh, it's all so new. I know what the sandbox of Hatchetfield is. I kind of know where it all fits.
Yes,
And this was like,
totally.
yeah, like
Finding
how
new
far
new
and
ground. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It
Even like
definitely
when we blocked Curse Crazy, I remember there was kind of a question of like, how mean are the townspeople to Ella? How broad are they? How and
right,
I think one of your questions was like how much is this effect? Like trying to just figure out what are the stakes.
right.
But you know, I thought you did that so beautifully where you
Oh,
made
thank
it
you.
funny, but you also were like, oh God, I there was a real heart to it too. And yeah, and I think
You.
also Nick, I got the sense that Nick was also sort of we're all figuring that out, which is the fun
Totally.
of doing a new
Totally.
show. It's really exciting, but it also is a little scary because if you're doing like Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, you go, this is I know what the rails are. If you're doing
Yeah,
Into the Woods, you
there's
go,
a
I know what the
roadmap.
rails are.
Yeah,
Right.
there's totally a clear roadmap with shows like that that have been around for decades. Versions of Cinderella that are closer to the original, source material, or at least the version of Cinderella that's been made famous.
Right.
The Disneyfied version. When you see those versions, it's just it's so much easier to kind of drop into that. But then also, it's harder, I think, than to play because when you
Right.
drop into those structures or kind of the I don't know the mechanism of the show. It becomes a machine when it's just sort of regurgitated the same old, maybe a little bit of differences here and there. But this is so different. So I think once I kind of wrapped my head around that, it made it easier to play and find things for this Ella because she I think in the first half of the show, she's very sweet and, you really feel for her. And I don't think that changes in the second half, but I think in the first half, she has to make herself so small,
Right.
because of the trolls and also when she's around Tadius and the prince for the first time, and their nobility. And she's also, she comes from nobility, but her house has fallen. She comes from, she's broken at this point. She's not who she was before. So she's very small in that instance as well. And not only are they nobility, but the prince is royalty. So again, she has to shrink herself. But in the second half, she has no limitations because of the magic
Right.
that's been bestowed upon her. So it was fun and interesting to see how far does she go when the restraints are off. You know,
I
all of a sudden
loved
now that, that she's been cloaked in magic.
yeah, because I loved it and I noticed that so much, like the difference from like the scene where you're by the riverbed and you're cleaning yourself and you're so like, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't want to versus
Yeah,
like I loved, and it's one of my favorite scenes I've ever gotten to do in a show was getting to do the big scene that Ella and Tadius do, but
I
to
love
like
that scene
see
too.
that at that point she's like, I'm playing the game. Like I'm doing
Yeah,
what I got to do, and I loved
yeah.
seeing you find her power over the course of the show. That was really, really, really fun.
And
And that
another
you didn't make her feel diminished like she was weak at the beginning, but had to out of self-protection. I thought you played that really beautifully as well.
that was, and thank you for that. I appreciate that because that I feel like that was such a fine line, you know, because yes, she is technically weaker than the trolls, but in her heart and in her determination, for things that matter to her. She's not. She's got a lot of grit, which is why Step on Your Grave, I think that's the first time we see Ella kind of venting, ranting about all of these things that, have gone wrong in her life and what she wants to do about it. And it's right after she gets, screamed at, and she's cowering in fear. And then all of a sudden she's like, okay, I know I've got some time to myself here, and and I've made a new friend, and this is a friend that she doesn't expect to ever speak back to her. You know what I mean? Like with humans, it's like, okay, can I say the thing? Can I say that I'm, being abused by trolls? No, because then, I could die. But to this frog who, she's not expecting it, this conversation to go anywhere, then that becomes her confidant. And then she can just we get a glimpse of that strength that she has underneath the surface.
Yeah.
And then in act two, with the Ella Tadius moment, I love that scene as well, because it's really one of the most grounded, and a long stretch of groundedness in the show as well.
Yeah.
Where there's not a lot of crazy magic or fantastical things going on. There's also not a lot of silly comedy or anything like that. And I think that's why it kind of breathes so well in the show, because there's a lot of fun, crass, silly, crazy, wild comedy, and a lot of darkness and things. And then you have this scene that's just these two people kind of playing a little game of chess,
Sussing each other out.
yeah, really trying to feel out, are we on the same level? Are we friend
Right.
or foe? And then we we find that common ground. And then you sort of see Ella kind of, I don't know, exhale a little bit and really kind of
Yeah.
figure out what her next step is, because now she's talking to someone that she actually confides in, a human being that she's actually confided in. He doesn't die right after she confides in, because the last time she confided in people, I don't know if
Just
we cut this out if it's too big of a spoiler, but after she confides in her two best friends, who are the last bit of family she
okay.
has on this earth,
I'm not
like,
laughing, but it's so sad.
no, it's one of the things where I was like, I remember when first reading it, or when we first did like the group like table read or read through at the first rehearsal. And it gets to that point where like everyone's like oohing and eyeing, like, oh, Ella's so
Aw.
happy. Oh, the friends, oh, they're so cute. Oh, the friends are, it's so charming. And you're so happy for them. And then the very next
Just
moment is just
rip them
death
away.
and despair. Yeah, it's just, and we were like, Nick, what did you, like, what did you
Classic
write?
Nick
Like, how,
fashion.
seriously. And he's just sitting there like, like proud of
Cackling.
himself. Yeah, like, dude. But with
You
this
know,
moment with Tadius, like, she gets to actually confide in someone and be herself without these dastardly like repercussions.
there was a physicality that you always did too, and it was in that scene where I always felt like, oh, she trusts me now. Of when you would like walk back over and sit down and say, but
Hmm.
he's the most disgusting,
Yeah, yeah.
man I've ever met. And like you kind of sit down and just like, huh. And like your shoulders would kind of fold over and you'd be like, I don't even know what I'm
All of a
doing here.
sudden, that was the thing. It was like all of a sudden Ella doesn't need to be prim and proper and, have this, poised posture anymore, because now she's sort of with a friend. And I really
Yeah.
wanted it to feel like, the choice to go back over to Tadius and then kind of slump next to him. It's like, okay, let me level with you here.
Yeah.
Let's,
And we're
we're
both
being
like,
real
we're
now.
both in this circus. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah,
I also feel
crazy
like,
people around us.
yeah, the line to me that actually I think really helped lock in what I was like, oh, this is the show, is the line that you did in that scene, which obviously you did so much more than that scene. So but that was the one that I had the most with you. But the moment when you have this beautiful monologue where you talk about like, there are those who would want to,
Oh, sure,
be
sure.
far worse. And it's this raw revenge, but it's heartbroken. And then I come up and say, oh yeah, let's kill the king. And then
And
you're
you're like,
like,
yeah.
I'm not talking about the king. That flip to me helps solidify like, oh, that's the show. That it can be this, it can get really juicy
Mm.
and Shakespearean, and then an immediate, you drop the voice, the posture, everything was very contemporary. I just like that reverse there made me go, that's the show. That's the like what the sandbox we're playing in. It kind of locked into me how to like navigate the turns, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's funny too because I remember in rehearsal when we said it that way, I kind of did it like that. I kind of threw it away and it was in between the times we were running it. I think we might have been on a break or coming back from a break or something. And then, you and I were kind of like running lines quickly or something like that. And I was jokingly like, I'm not talking about the king. And then Nick was like, I love that. I love
Yeah,
that energy. And I was like, really? It just doesn't feel like, because for me, I was so locked in on the doom and gloom and despair of
sure.
Ella's story in this that a lot of the comedic turns like my brain was fighting itself with that. And so even with the you were like, oh, it's treason when Tadia says that, and then I was, no, it's reason. That
Yeah.
was even in between times when we were running it, and you and I were running lines, or we were sitting on that bench in the rehearsal room, and I just kind of was like, no, it's reason. And Nick was like, yeah, 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 something like that. And I was like, okay, that just feels like too lighthearted. I was just
Are
joking.
you sure?
Seriously,
Yeah.
I was like, no, Nick, I was just playing, just because, to get the lines and stuff. And he's like, no, 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 that feels good for the moment, with them bonding and stuff. Um, and then similarly on the opposite end of that, where that was so light and I was having a hard time getting to that, there were lines that ended up being trimmed from that scene that felt really
Mm,
harsh.
right.
And that was
Right.
also
Wasn't
really
it
hard.
like a fucking servant? And
Yeah, and I was
that
like,
got cut.
I kept pushing back on this, and ultimately Nick was like, "No, I hear you, I hear you, I get it." Because I was like, I really wanted Ella to remain likable. She's going on a journey that is very tricky. When
Yeah.
you're seeking vengeance and you kind of cross that line of like, now I'm going to be like this, murderous warrior. It's empowering and it's exciting for her to get justice for her friends, but there's a line between vengeance and justice. They're two sides of the same coin, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can kind of teeter too far to one side than the other. I mean, being so far on the justice side is not a negative thing. It's not a bad thing. But you kind of want to have I don't know, the catharsis, that kind of
Yeah.
release, or that, what I mean, the feeling like that accomplishment of vengeance, of like, and now they got what they deserved,
Yeah.
but still leaning more on justice, versus being on the vengeance side where you're like, and I'm going to kill everybody and I'm going to, just fuck it all up because I've been
Yeah.
wronged. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then you just see red, and then maybe innocent lives, are
Yeah.
taken at that point. So I I didn't want in that scene that's so grounded and such a breath of fresh air between these two characters to be too harsh, and then all of a sudden in like half a page now we're like buddy buddies, and then also there's like, there's a chemistry between them that is almost romantic but we're not sure yet. So it's like it just felt too far on one side. And I
Yeah.
and I was like, I feel like Ella would lose people. I feel like, to look down on servants in that way. Yes, servants and peasants are ultimately who, killed her mom, or, dragged her into the square and burned her at the stake. So I think there's definitely some feelings there. It's mixed and complicated, but also she watched the servants in her family home get eaten by these trolls. And that is traumatic and awful. And I feel like there's a sense of connection to them. And then now with Tadius, she's trying to one up him, but I don't think
Right.
it's, putting him down to the point of offending and putting down all servants, all people, all men of station.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taking that out ended up, I think, for me at least on my side, I don't know how you felt about it, but I felt like the flow ended up
Oh,
feeling
100%.
more locked in and smooth.
100%. And that's kind of the fun part of I feel like I'm so spoiled with getting to do largely in the last 5, 6, 7 years original stuff is part of
Mm,
the fun. And it can feel a little scary when something you've been practicing for weeks, all of a sudden it's changed or modified or cut.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it is a really cool part of feeling like you're not locked into something and that there is a freedom to like, even from Nick to be like, hey, what about this? Or maybe if I tried it this way, and to feel like
yeah,
you
yeah.
can
Nick is
find
really
it.
good
And
about that. Yeah, it's a
yeah, and
conversation. It's a
and
conversation.
a lot of times when you audition, it's like, these are the lines. This is you're not going to change it, especially like if it's like a Broadway thing or
Yeah,
tours.
yeah,
It's like you're just there to kind of do what the original cast did, and so there's a real fun and freedom to that of like going, wow, that is those edits or like that adjustment does really make this better, and you keep finding it, and that's a
And that's what a
fun that's a
workshop is,
yeah. Yeah,
you
and I
know?
think that's a you mentioned this at the beginning, but I think it's so true. Like, obviously, I'm so proud of the work that we do, but I think one of the things that makes it kind of different is it is sort of you're seeing the process in real time. It's not this thing that we spend, Broadway musicals spend like what 10, 15. I mean,
Years,
they spend so long in
years
development,
getting developed. Yes,
and you're
yes.
really seeing the kind of the first iteration of
Iteration.
the thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Even like we we did this like Spies concert back in like April, and at the
yeah.
show we watched the show from 2016 as we like did the concert, and it was so
Oh, that's
strange to be
awesome.
like, oh, I would like I we've talked about like, oh yeah, we would change that, and oh that would move, and so you're watching it being like, but this was really the first idea of it.
That's
And
why
that's
it's so hard though to
exciting.
watch. I feel like
Yes,
I'm
yes,
I the digital ticket is coming out
100%,
and I am just like, oh,
100%.
how much am I going to cringe at myself? How many moments am I going to be like, gosh, I wish I did this differently, or I wish I had done that there, or shoot, this one, the show that they choose for the digital ticket. I'm like, oh, that's the one night where I didn't do that thing that I loved
Exactly.
and did every other show, and but that's live theater as well. But
Yeah.
that's why it's hard to take an experience like live theater and put it on camera,
Mhm.
because the beauty of live theater is that, oh, I missed this thing tonight, okay, so tomorrow night I'm gonna nail it.
New thing.
And
Yep.
yeah, or I love the way that we played this scene, but it would be cool, let's try um a little more anger here, or let's try a little more flirtation there, or let's try, whatever it may be, maybe Ella's just going to be more of a scaredy cat in the first half
Yeah.
tonight. And then in the second half, her turn is like much bigger. I don't know. You have the opportunity to sort of play with it, and not in any drastic way, not in any way where people coming multiple nights will be like, whoa, they totally like
Yeah.
redid something. But for you as an actor, you can kind of tweak and hone in on things in a way that you
Yep.
can't with on camera stuff. You do your takes and then they pick the best out of those takes, and then they comp it together. They cut it
Yeah.
together in a way that is the performance. But with theater, you have to cut the best bits together yourself live,
And
you
so much of
know?
like the Nerdy Prudes edit, I mean, that was literally in that edit, which I spent months working on with Nick, of like, in one scene, this line will be from a Saturday night, and then
Sure.
Mariah will turn, and then this cut will be from the next weekend, and then like it's kind of a Frankenstein, but then there is an
You can do that with camera.
intimidation. Yeah, I find it to be a little. It's cool, but there is a scary part where you go and you do it, and you go, well, that's the version that will live on forever.
Forever.
And you
Yeah.
go, God, I
Yeah.
would have loved to not. So there is this. I'm actually curious. It was a question I had for you in the filming of it. Obviously, we filmed live performances, and then we did
Yeah.
pickup days. You're an actor who's done a ton of live theater, but you're also a film and TV actor. Did you find yourself modifying anything when you knew like, hey, this is a close up, hey, we're doing a pickup, or did you really just try to stick to like, this is what I'm doing in the live show, and I'm just going to try to find that again? Like, does that change for you at all?
I tried to stick with what I'd been doing in the live show. We had 4 shows prior to our 2 filming days, and then we had 4 shows after. Now, here's the thing. The 2 filming days, because we were doing multiple takes of everything, I feel like collectively it just kind of polished up the show.
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm. We
because
finished filming. We're like, now let's open.
no, no, seriously, that was the energy. Everyone was like, "Well, yeah, I know the show now." And it's not like we didn't go in prepared the week before, but with tech and we didn't have a lot of time to get it reps in of the show
Yeah,
before it
yeah,
opened. Comes a point with theater where you got to do the thing on stage with the
yeah.
hair, with the makeup, with the costumes, doing the costume changes. I had costume, hair, and makeup changes all in one quick change at times, and that
Almost
was
every scene, I felt like you were
yeah,
changing backstage, like like.
yeah,
Well, I think all the ladies in the show had a exponentially higher order of difficulty in terms of pure logistics, just
yeah,
wigs, tights, dresses, like,
yeah, yeah.
and the guys, we had a few costume changes, but it's like, and then a lot of the looks took a lot, like even like Kim's look. It's like she only had
Yeah,
one big change in Act 1, but she spends 20-30 minutes in the chair, and then
Yes.
you guys, the troll ladies and you, I mean, are just I constantly and that is
Constantly transforming off stage to then
you
come back on,
guys
like frantically doing
I
that
mean
off stage to then come back
you
on stage and be
crushed
like,
it and be chill.
yeah, yeah,
No, I
all of a
just want to
sudden.
just shout out you guys. You guys, I know, like had such a higher order of extreme difficulty and stress, and you guys handled it like freaking champs. But we're meanwhile the guys are on our dressing room. We're like doing riddles.
Like
We're like
downtime,
sitting.
no, seriously, actual downtime. And I think the only downtime I ever had was during Facade in Act One, and then in Act Two, the
Right,
downtime I have is I think the Crumb and Hop a Lot scene where like they're
right.
training, and
The
then
little
other than
Perry
that,
stuff, and yeah,
yeah, exactly. Other than that, I'm like on and off stage pretty quickly, pretty consistently. And just all of getting like, going through those motions, getting those reps in. That I was kind of terrified going into opening night because it's just like so many things. And yeah, just a lot of stuff to think about. So
because
then after we
on
filmed it,
Broadway, you do previews for like what, like 2 months. Like
yeah,
you literally
yeah,
just
months
preview the show, and then
and
it
tweak,
hasn't
workshop,
even opened yet.
adjust. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so honestly, when we did the filming, that felt like an extra chance to really hone in the
yeah.
show. And then by the final four shows, Curt, I was like, gosh darn it, why wasn't I doing this thing here, that thing there? Or why wasn't I singing it this way, the first weekend? Or why didn't I do this during filming? There are
Right.
things that I found through the filming process because of doing it over and over again, that I, ended up just kind of honing in on a little bit more.
Right, because filming is inherently fragmented. It's like you're stopping, you're starting, and you're like, okay, let's go back. Versus like when you're doing a show, you're getting to
Yes.
live you're like
Which
getting
for
to
Step
be
on
in the
Your
moment.
Grave,
Right,
yes, Step on Your Grave, I felt that the most. Because Step on Your Grave, like I was saying earlier, is about this buildup of frustration and anger towards the trolls, particularly the stepmother. And she's finally letting it out. But when we do the show live, I have all of that buildup. I get yelled at. I have the
right,
townspeople, shunning me, and stepmother screaming at me right before I sing the song. All of these different things to sort of kind of put that pressure on Ella so that she can burst for Step on Your Grave. But doing it after, I don't know what we did before, but just all out of order and everything like that,
right.
and just kind of coming out and just dropping into Step on Your Grave, I feel like I was able to do what I needed to do for it. And also I feel like there's something that was just a little more punched in for the live version, versus
Totally, totally.
the filming day. But
I
I think
will.
cutting
I mean,
between it all, it'll
yeah, I
come
was gonna say
together. But
I don't know what the edit's gonna look like, but I was surprised in Nerdy Prudes at least how often we ended up using the close-ups as sort of a framework for punch-ins, but the momentum was often the live thing.
I love that.
And
I hope
yeah,
that it ends up being that way for this as well, because also the camera work, the quality was so good for Nerdy Prudes, and like cutting between the filming day and um the live recordings, I think were really smooth. You didn't feel like, okay, now we're going to the
right.
cinematic mode to all of a sudden like, an iPhone camera or something like that. Everything, the quality of everything was so high. Which I know it, as far as filming goes, it was the same this time around. So I am like
I would
selfishly
say too,
hoping that a lot of the live stuff gets
because
used.
I'm super nosy. I like was over there by Video Village, and this go around Benji Dell was the DP,
Yeah,
and I gotta say the footage looked amazing. Like I was like I was watching the takes, and I was like, this looks so good. I was just kind of peeking around the corner, like going, ooh, what
yeah,
does that look
yeah.
like? And and listen, your feelings about yourself are so valid, but I just have to say, Kim and I would talk about this every night. You were so consistent. I mean, just
Thank you.
and I know like your experience in your own head it's your experience, but like from the outside looking in, it was just like, damn, every show you just like
I
vocally
appreciate y'all.
acting beats, but it not but and I say this like you're one of my very favorite people to act with in the sense that consistent but not stale. If that makes any sense,
Oh,
like
cool. Thank you. Yeah,
you
no,
know what I'm
totally,
saying?
totally. Yeah, 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 yeah.
You
Yeah.
sometimes I think you have actors who are really great at they are boy, they can give the same performance every night, which
Right.
is, a skill. and I think especially like Broadway or something like that but every night we did our stuff felt fresh and new. But
Mhm.
you always were locked in from my perspective. So,
Appreciate that.
obviously that's
Appreciate
just
it so
my
much.
observation and
No, I
everyone's
appreciate it,
experience of
and
doing it
it's
is
but it's helpful because Kim and I talked about this a lot too. Because similarly, our experiences with our voices are pretty similar, or there's some intersectionality when we talk about it. Of like, oh, this isn't feeling as grounded as I wanted, or I'm not being able to get to the bottom of my range the way that I want, or oh, I'm just not. It's not quite in the pocket. I'm not placing this the way that I want right now, and all those different kinds of things. But I'm literally standing there, watching her sing Ash to Ash, like holding her hand and looking up, just looking up at her, gazing at her in awe because of how wonderful she is and how consistent she is. But then there are times where she would be, in her head about certain moments
totally.
and stuff. And we would talk about that a lot because that was just constantly, I'm like, oh, nitpicking this thing or that thing. And she'd be like, honestly, you sound very consistent. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Because the way that you feel internally in your vocal mechanism is not always what is being perceived
Yep.
out in the acoustic space. That's just the science of it. You're not going to hear yourself the way
Yep.
other people hear you. And that's something I've been dealing with and struggling with a lot in my vocal journey.
Hmm.
Since college, my voice teacher was like, Bryce, stop listening to yourself. She would always be able to tell when I was actively listening to myself versus just sort of like experiencing, singing
Yeah.
and experiencing my voice in the space. But when I started like
I
zoning in on my voice, she could always tell because I would tense up or something in my technique would shift, and I was judging myself in the moment. And you can't perform authentically and
mhm.
earnestly and also be like judging.
Yep. It's kind of this beautiful dissatisfaction of like you're never going to be 100% happy with your stuff, and on some level that is what makes you excellent at what you do, because if you didn't care you'd be like whatever. But
Yeah,
then there's
totally,
that flip
totally.
side of how do I take that desire to always hone in and always try to refine, and then also let go and go, it is what it is. And it's
It's a
that's
balancing act.
every
It's
actor
such a
has. Yeah,
yes. It's so hard to find that balance. And I feel like sometimes I'm better at finding the balance than others. This show,
totally.
one of the most rewarding things about this is because there was so much, pressure on this Ella character, and so much of the show revolves around Ella. And I had so much material to cover in this show. Um, I was curious and not doubtful, but yeah, I'll just stick with curious. I was
Sure.
curious about whether or not I could pull it off or how I could pull it off. I haven't had to, carry this large of a load in a show before. And even when I did Book of Mormon and I understudied Navalungi, and then I had like 1 month stint where I took over the role as like they needed as like an interim kind of
Hmm.
cover. And even then when I was playing the role consistently, it still didn't feel, it was just more balanced as far as like an ensemble of lead characters versus
Right.
Ella in this case,
Title
it's just
character journey. Yeah.
yeah, totally, totally. Um and honestly, if I'm going to be really real with myself, when I was doing Book of Mormon and I was doing good work as Nabalungi, um and I was so hard on myself. I was so unkind to myself. I really was. To the point where I wasn't fully enjoying the experience and I
Right.
was actively thinking, "Oh, I that vowel wasn't the right, shape or placement, so then the pitch suffered and or oh, my breath support here or there." And I've got bootleg from some of my performances. And I if I say so myself, sound pretty great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Bryce now can see that and I can
Right.
give myself grace back then. But in that experience, I just couldn't fully like enjoy and open up and let go.
Yeah.
All of those things you want to do as an actor. So with this opportunity, I felt it felt like it was so rewarding because I've you know almost 6.5 years of therapy, a lot of voice lessons, and a lot of just self work
Yeah.
and training, and the mental kind of strengthening sort of my mental fortitude with all of this. I felt like I was able to apply all of that in this experience, and trust myself,
Yeah.
even when and not judge myself in the moment. You best believe I was judging myself after something, but
Totally.
in the
Totally.
but in the moment, I'm like, let's do what we got to do. Let's tell
Yeah.
the story. Let's give Ella a fair chance here to like
Yeah.
go through her arc. And then when we're off stage, then Bryce can be like, all right, shoot, was I a little pitchy? Was I really working for it there? Okay, I'll revisit that for the next show.
Yeah.
And instead
But
of
that
like
is the
beating
artist's
myself up about
brain.
it.
Yeah, like that is, and I obviously it can become an unhealthy thing, but I do think like to some extent that is a beautiful balance of like staying present, accepting what it is when it happens, and then later going back and being like, I could make that better, I could fix this, whatever. But
And not carrying
truly,
it to a point where it gets in the way for the next thing.
right,
Because then I think
right,
in the past I would be scared going back out because, I would
right,
be thinking about the last, screw up, and the screw up being something that really only I'm noticing oftentimes. And then if it is
right,
something big enough for other people to notice, then I would really, then my inner critic would be like, well, see, you screwed that up, and see, it was noticeable. But now it's just like I went up to Matt Dahan, in between shows, or no, at I think at intermission for one show, and I was like, "Hey, level with me. Step on your grave. What was I pushing? Was I pitchy?" And and the band was like, "Bryce, you sound great. It's the same every time." And I was like, "I appreciate that, y'all," but I was like, "Matt, you've heard this so many times, and you've heard me do this a bajillion times now from your perspective." And he was like,
right.
at the bridge. And I was like, right. And he was like, not pitchy, but you were working for it. And, it wasn't as in the pocket as it has been. I'm like, okay, cool. Thank you.
Right.
Noted. Cause I'm give me the feedback and I'm gonna work on
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
I've gotten to a place where my inner critic now is manageable and isn't running rampant with feedback to the point of, tearing me down. But that's
And
also
that
why,
takes a, oh no, go ahead. Sorry. I would
well, I
say
was
that
just
takes
gonna
a
say,
beautiful, sorry, the
so
delay.
no, it's the delay. Go ahead.
Well, just that's I think such a lovely, it takes a humility and trust to be able to have collaborators to say, I'm going to ask for feedback because I really want to get better, and trust that, because that's a vulnerable thing, right? Because you're opening yourself up to that. And to know that somebody like Matt, of course, can give a note and know like nobody has your back more than Matt does. And so you can take that note or take that adjustment and be like, thank you. Like that's the beauty of having a relation, a work environment where people can trust each other. I'm like that too. Like
Totally.
I want a director to be like, hey, you're pushing, hey, this is whatever, versus
Yeah.
just somebody, I've when I it's nice to have that, to know, great, I do have some parameters I can work with, but it takes a lot of trust. That's all I was gonna say.
No, absolutely. It does. It does. And it's true, getting considering the source, the
Yeah.
feedback, and creating, like you said, an environment, or being a part of an environment that you can trust to get honest feedback that can only, make you better, and it's not going to be something that tears you down. And for me also, on the flip side, getting so much positive feedback sometimes can stress me out, because then it feels like an
Mm-hmm.
expectation.
Ooh,
And
that's so right.
you,
That's so
you,
right.
and so I was gonna say, between shows one day, or it might have been on one of the tech day. No, it was between shows. It was between shows because you were reading a review, and I was like, I don't want to hear reviews. You're like, no, it's so positive, and I was like, I know, I appreciate that. Like, because I knew
Right.
you weren't gonna bring up a negative review. I was like, I know you're about to read something super sweet and super positive. And I was like, but I just want to keep a clear
Yeah.
head, and I don't want to get outside expectations, because from the cast I appreciate the support and I know where it's coming from and everything, because you've seen the process
Right.
intimately throughout.
Right. Right.
But we're out the
We're all
outside
real
like, oh,
vulnerable
this
with each other. Yeah.
exactly. And then outside, and not to say that positive reviews aren't amazing and sweet and kind. It's so wonderful. But again, um, it's like, oh, everything, sometimes it can be these grandiose things like, that was perfect. This was so amazing. This was the best thing ever. And that's really kind. But in the moment, it's like, shoot, I have to be that every time. I have to do this every time. They're putting this out there based off of this one performance that they've seen, and now everyone is going to expect this high quality level thing.
Yeah.
And my brain, my inner critic in particular, just starts overworking the positivity to the
Yeah.
point where it becomes pressure, expectations, sometimes for me unattainable expectations. And being a
Right.
recovering perfectionist,
Right.
I've been working years, to kind of disconnect myself and my artistry from the idea that it has to be perfect.
Right.
Because like you said, if something's perfect, or if, it's almost like the what you were saying about, like, oh, I don't care, it's all fine. It can be both, because then you can just be like, okay, well, it's great, whatever I do, is great, and there's nothing else to work towards. There's nothing else to
Right.
attain. Even if it's amazing, even if it's impeccable, then it's like, where's the that exciting energy of striving for something and pushing through something? And sometimes the imperfections are the realness in that person that actually add to the character or add to whatever that person's particular storytelling, style is, and it can be something special. So
Yeah.
I sometimes the all the outside voices, the positive and the negative, can weigh heavily on me. So I try to create the boundaries I need.
It's interesting too, like, I'm probably guilty of this too, of where if you get a really positive reaction, whether from an audience, maybe a review, not only does it put pressure sometimes on like, oh, did I do that way tonight? But it can also inflate your ego in the other direction where you're like, instead of organically working through the moment that made it so great, you go, well, I know this moment kills. So, and it's like you
Totally.
don't stay present because you're like, well, this is going to get a laugh or whatever. And you kind of take your
They're
foot
gonna
off the
love it
gas a little
anyway.
bit.
It's gonna be great, anyway, because of, how we're doing it. But yeah, if we're constantly trying to fine tune something, or if we're constantly, if we set our scene, the Ella Tadius scene, we've set it, we know what the beats are, we know the dynamics of the scene, but there still can be, like you were
Yeah.
saying earlier, just something fresh every time about it. Or we could just, rest on, okay, the way the scene, is written, and, doing the bare minimum will get the point across and it'll still be entertaining, and, people will love it because it all looks good and it all looks cool. But no, we actually care. We actually
Yeah.
really care,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that
and
that adds something.
I don't want to obviously keep you too long today, but just to end on that note, I just want to say the
Sure.
thing that I was just really blown away by is the work, the effort, the dedication. I know how much time you devoted just every day. Probably, I know before you came to rehearsal, how you took care of your voice, yourself. You
Thank you.
put so much love and passion into this, and you were so consistent. And I think people are going to be absolutely blown away at your work. You were like an absolute star. Whatever. Don't take it or don't take it. But you absolutely now you can
Thanks,
take
man.
it. You're not
No,
doing the show anymore.
no, I know.
you
I appreciate
you
it and I receive it.
I cannot wait for people to see your performance. I can't wait to people to like just embody this character and like live through this character. I think people are going to just absolutely love your work and be completely blown away by it. And I like it was amazing to watch you work every night. And I'm
Thank
like so
you.
happy I'm so honored that I got to see you do this. You know what I mean? Like on
That's
stage with
so
you.
kind,
You
Curt.
just you were incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Thank
And I
you.
also kept thinking about how weird it was during the Ella Taddy scene that a year before that we were playing Shapiro and Bailey.
I know, I
It's
know.
just one
I
of
think
those things.
it's so great. It's so great. And this time, because we were both saying, hopefully we'll get to do something again together where we actually get to like play off each other more. But it's just like, yeah, I
I
love
was
the full
like,
circleness of it.
those are the same people.
Here we
Anyway, no,
are, Shapiro. I was gonna say
uh
Shapiro and Tadius, but that's not it. Shapiro and Bailey.
yeah, like just switch one out, see what
Yeah.
happens.
Oh, I
But
mean, I
no,
feel like Ella would like rip Tadius,
oh,
or
she'd be
no,
like,
Ella would rip Bailey to shreds. Ella would rip Bailey to
done,
shreds.
done.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing there.
um,
But I did want to say, being a fan of Starkid for years, and then being able to, lead a show in this capacity, this magnitude, was just, it was terrifying. It was challenging. And it was also such a huge honor and incredibly rewarding, because of the terror and the challenge that I was able to overcome, I think. And then collectively that we were all able to overcome. Everyone was spread thin during this production. Everyone had so many other commitments. And some people were, wearing multiple hats within the production team and in the cast and things like that.
yeah,
And we still were able to do what we needed to do. And I just think that's really amazing, really cool. Theater finds a way.
yeah, and that like I remember how I had that thought, I think the day before dress rehearsal of just like, I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I just kind of was like, these are like the best people you know. Everybody's awesome. Nobody here has an ego, and I was like, it's gonna come together. Like it's gonna be, you know, there'll be mishaps and whatever, but like there is that feeling of like we'll get it. And I just think, there is something magical about theater but also I think just getting it to do, especially with this group of artists and
Yeah.
getting to play with you guys every night and just to like see everyone work, it's just one of my favorite things that I get to do. And, you know, I think finding a way to do it more often, more consistently,
Yeah.
doing it longer, like, it's like, these
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
things that I really in my head of like, I love this so much. How can we keep making it sustainable and accessible and maybe, you know, this show obviously was so new and so different, but it's like, I hope it sets a benchmark and it allows us to do more things that are, you know, we have more, even more time with and more time to develop. And, you know, it's just, it really feels like magic to get to make something. And the fact that audiences specifically for Starkid just care. Like, that's something
Yeah. Yeah.
I have so many friends who do theater here, and it's like, you're just lucky if anybody shows up. You're lucky if anybody even engages. And I feel like
I
we're
mean,
just
people
super
were
lucky that,
flying from around the world
yes.
to come see
And
Cinderella's castle. And the people who couldn't make it, you know, I'm getting DMs and comments and things about just the support and excitement for the digital ticket. And then people who are so excited for then the pro shot next year. And, you know, and like you were saying earlier too, it's like, well, after the process, you know, I can kind of take in
yeah,
all of the response, you know, to the
yeah.
show, and seeing that positive response is just so, it's so fulfilling, you know, and it's
Hmm.
so exciting that it's reaching people, even people who haven't seen it and who are just seeing, you know, photos, you know, teasers, fan art, all of that engagement. I think is just really exciting that they believe in the Star Kid so much, and they've been so welcoming to me as a newer Star Kid, which really fills me up and kind of it makes me a little emotional because just again the full circleness
Yeah.
of it all.
And I think
Um,
that's what was so cool watching you is like, you just stepped into that role. I know you had so much you were juggling, but you stepped into it from the event, from my vantage point, with such ease and grace. I
Thank
know
you.
that there was, not to say you were like waltzing in there. I know you put so much work into it, but you just handled it like you were like, yeah, let's do it.
I took
And
it
it
really
was
seriously, and I wanted to put my best foot
incredible to
forward.
watch.
I wanted to put my best foot forward for the company and for, you know, Nick, who, you know, trusted me so much um, with this part, and allowed me to infuse myself and my view of the character and let me kind of inform the character in a lot of ways, which I really appreciated. Um, but yeah, I didn't want to let anybody down. I didn't want to let Starkid down as a company of people that I respect so much and I love working with so much. And I didn't want to let the fandom down, you know, like this newer, you know, just like not an OG, but, you know, who's now taking the helm of this, you know, huge, like Starkid's biggest production.
Yeah.
It was an
And
intimidating
you did the
feat, you
opposite.
know.
You elevated. I think you elevated everyone's game, and everybody was like, "Oh, damn. Okay, let's go." So no, you pushed us in the other direction. You let no one down, and you man, I cannot wait for people to see it. It's gonna be
I
great.
am so sure I'm going to be cringing at myself the
Me
whole
too.
time. I can't, like, why are actors like this? I'm gonna be like,
I know, I know. It is kind of funny though how, like you said, things that have immediately ended, I feel that way, but I will go revisit things from years ago where I almost
I just
forgot
watched
what it
Nerdy
was.
Fruits the other day. I
And you're
just
like,
watched
it's
it.
pretty good.
No, honestly, I was like, okay, Shapiro. I literally,
Yeah.
I because you can't get a full sense of it in the moment.
No.
And but once you remove yourself and you kind of give yourself that sort of, you know, I guess retroactive grace, you know, where you're like, here,
Yeah.
you did good. Be kind to yourself with this thing. Because I mean, I just think from Nightmare Time 2 to Nerdy Prudes to Working Boys to this, it's just the journey, my journey with Star Kid. I'm just always kind of, I've, you know, intimidated because I've watched everybody for years. And then nervous to, I don't know, make my presence known, I guess, or to kind of ask the questions I feel I want and need to ask for the character,
Yeah.
or I don't know, just do the things I feel like I need to do in the space. But everyone was always so gracious, so welcoming, so encouraging to just like be the professional you are.
And I
And
think you set a high bar too with, it could be easy. I could see in a situation of like, hey, I'm a fan of this kind of organization and what they do, to like with that pressure kind of shrink away and just be like, oh, I'm just here. But you took charge in such a gracious but like professional way. And I don't mean that like you took charge as in like overstep, but like you were so in control and command of what you were there to do. And it really just set for me a tone of like, yeah, like that's it, and I think that takes a lot of courage and guts to step into a situation and just be like, despite this being a lot, I'm still going to like own this. And you did it so beautifully and
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
badassily.
I'll receive that. I fully receive that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely am just excited for more with Starkid too. Cause again, with this process, I learned a lot for myself as a performer, being able to carry this load, then also just, being able to interact and play off of, just play off all of y'all. In particular, like, I had my moment with Joey with the, what was his name? I was like, Curt, I'm already deleting files in my brain of like, and the show's done and whew. But
we blacked out as the second the show is over.
It's like, but yeah, I had the moment with Sir Preston, which was really fun. The Tadius scene was so great. And then getting to play off of James so much and him being a character that's so different from who he is as a human. Like James is like the sweetest, kindest, just like most wonderful.
Truly is.
I love him so much. And to like watch him play the prince and like be disgusted by this dude, like just that was great work. And it was so fun and exciting to be able to play off of everyone and also just to see everyone doing their thing. Anytime I would make eye contact with Lauren on stage, it was dangerous.
Lauren is one of those people where I go, I can't look at you. I can't look at you.
No, there are times, and sometimes I would break, I would internally break and have to like, and Mariah would clock it. She would just see a shift in my eyes. And then she would kind of like have to, oh no. But then Lauren came off stage oblivious. I remember being like, oh my gosh, Lauren, I almost broke. And she was like, what happened? What do you mean?
I think
and
during,
Mariah and I are like cackling.
During the ball scene. No. During yes. No, the scene where the trolls like come on stage during the wedding and Lauren would always like turn around and just noises would be coming out of her mouth. She'd be like, meh. and I'm supposed to be scared and terrified. And I'd just be like, all right. Same with Ruth. She would do that with Ruth. Just noises would come out of her mouth. And I'd be like, I have to not listen because I'm going to break.
Do you remember? Okay, this is so off topic. I'm so sorry, but it is connected to what you just said with Ruth. In one of the cop scenes or one of the like the interrogation scenes with all of the kids, when they would like ad lib a bunch, when they would just kind of like
when they're in the chairs. Well, it's like, when's the last time you saw him?
yes, and every night it would just get more and more and more, and I'm just standing there like, okay, I can't like, and all of them just extra.
Nick in the edit was like, we're cutting all of that out.
Cut it all out. But for the digital ticket folks, they got to see it, and also for us, I just remember being like, oh, I have to look at them because I'm the authority figure here. I have to look at them and act. I have to be present. But all I wanted to do was just look away. They're so funny. Everyone's so good.
Go check it out and see Bryce's just absolutely astounding work and be amazed as we all were. Bryce, thank you.
Kind.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. Seriously, I thoroughly enjoyed chopping it up with you.
Let's go.